Without much fanfare, I'm going to present our panelists, Aletha Barnes,
Here I am.
excellent. Peter Fernandez is a product manager at Google. Aletha is a senior technical program manager for Pluto TV. Win Haber, the director of engineering at GitLab. Michael Hilborn is the director of platform engineering and operations at Harvard Business School Online. Kim Robinson, enterprise agile coach at Assurance Consulting. And Stijn van Even is the VP of Development, Speech Recognition Solutions at Nuance Communications. So welcome and thank you, the panelists, for joining us tonight. So Aletha, please go first.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Aletha Barnes. As Pepe said, I am a senior technical program manager with Pluto TV. I have been working in Agile spaces for well over 10 years now. I started out my career as a product owner, moved into working as a Scrum Master, and then started doing Agile coaching at the team. And now I'm starting to move into the enterprise level. And so I'm very excited to be here. I would say that I am a serial empath. I love making connections with people and understanding who they are at the core. That has allowed me to be very successful, especially working with my Agile teams, having an understanding of what their problems are, being able to like really tap into those problem areas and ask the right questions. So also leading with a curiosity mindset to really help to unveil some of the issues that we have at a team as well as an organizational level as it pertains to how we're practicing Agile. So for me, I would say that's definitely one of the goods, the good aspects of it. I would also, in terms of bad, and Pepe, let me know if I'm not supposed to go into this just yet, but in terms of bad, I would say being very heavy with process when it comes to Agile and forgetting that Agile is supposed to be Agile in and of itself. I've seen that with a number of organizations, and it really can be very demoralizing to the teams. And to piggyback off of that, I would say the ugly would be leadership not really buying into the Agile space and not really being supportive of transformations. I feel like that is a major detriment in terms of really being able to be successful. So if at the top you're not getting the proper support and your leaders don't really understand what Agile is and what it isn't, it could really lead to many major issues down the road. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Thank you. Peter, you're next. You're up.
Hi, everyone. That was beautiful, Aletha. I'm so excited to be here. I feel like I'll learn a lot more about Agile tonight than I've ever learned on the job. I'm a product manager at Google. I've been at Google a few different roles for about 10 years. I've been in internet software since like 1995, 96, working for a very small publishing company that said like, hey, we heard about these website things. You're the computer fix-it guy, right? Here's a Unix book, and so from the very beginning, of my career, I was doing stuff fast and just getting it up and trying stuff. And so as my career developed, then more seasoned computer programmers came in as our company got bigger, and I saw a different kind of development style. And then Agile sort of came to be, and it was sort of a buzzword. And I read the Agile manifesto again just before joining, just so it was very fresh. And I feel like the manifesto itself is like very compelling and like a great way to focus attentions on teams. But since that came to be, I've worked on a bunch of different sides of various Agile projects. Again, it's to me, Agile is it's more of a state of mind. The process is defined by others, and I'm been on different sides of different kinds of processes of Agile. But again, I don't know if there's like one way to do it. So that's to me, the good is that Agile does suggest a way of working that is like, it's iterative, that you produce good work regularly, that it's sustainable, you know, that you're not subjected to burnout and all of that stuff as much. Like, again, as a philosophical principle, it's awesome. And it has made for better products, and it has been necessary to grow with internet and apps and how rapid everything changes now. You just have to be able to deploy. You have to put stuff out there. The bad, I think, would be scope creep, really. At least in my experience, on either side of either running a team that was doing Agile or being a vendor for another organization that was attempting Agile processes, like you can steer off course pretty easily. And so I feel like really good like project management is essential. And you know, again, as Aletha said, process. There is a good amount of process. Again, I feel like it's sort of necessary with we're not shrink wrapping software anymore. That hasn't happened. You know, it still happens, but not much. The ugly, I think, is the it's sort of tied to the bad in this scope creep aspect, but like, you know, various people who like are seeing a release, you know, here we finished our latest 2-week sprint. Here's what we produced. Oh, that's blue, huh? Yeah, can you make that, people losing sight of what you're doing with each of these iterations and kind of, again, leading to this sort of like, sort of fatigue and confusion. And again, that's where I feel like it does come back to good management to help kind of steer the ship through the changing seas.
Thank you, Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Wayne Haber, you are up, and thank you for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm Wayne Haber. Nice to see everybody. I'm the Director of Engineering at GitLab. I'm in charge of growth, fulfillment, applied machine learning, actually as of yesterday, and then also work on security at GitLab as well. So what I'd say is and I've been doing Agile in various forms probably all of my career. So I've seen Agile really succeed in one of my, not my first role, but one of my first roles. I was a developer on a team of 3. And nobody was in charge, and we were just kind of doing things. And I started organizing the work of others because we didn't have any priorities and nobody knew what anybody else was doing, just because it was needed. And actually really turned out I really liked it, even though I never expected to be in that kind of role. And I read the extreme programming books back then and really got a lot out of them. And we started doing that, you know, which evolved over time in parallel with Agile. And so Agile overall, we started doing scrums, and it just really succeeded. And as the team grew, and that company went from 3 people to 30 people, and ended up being really, really successful in building a product from scratch and iterating on it quickly. So, and everybody really liked it, especially the retrospectives, even back then, to improve over time, which gave and continues to give, not only make sure you're always improving, but also make sure you're getting buy-in from the team in the process, because they're actually able to improve it as they go. On the bad, you know, occasionally, you know, it's not a process, it's people using a process. So sometimes, you know, setting priorities can be hard. Still, even with Agile, you know, who is the directly responsible individual to decide? You know, it still challenges periodically, you know, even as of like 2 weeks ago, when I was working on a change, and it was a change that many people really liked and many people really hated. And talking about how do we do it, under what circumstances do we do it, and how do we allocate people's time? So still the setting of priorities, having a directly responsible individual, a DRI, is really important on setting the priorities for the team, such as a product manager, and then also disagreeing and committing, which I think started as an Amazon term of where people disagree and discuss, but then commit to the plan so you can move forward, is really key in Agile and other things. And often people interpret and essentially disagree, commit as disagree, which doesn't work so well. But overall, you know, I'm a big fan, and it continues to really serve me and my teams quite well.
Thank you for that, Wayne. Michael, thank you for joining. You're up.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone, and good evening. I'm Michael Hillborn. I'm a director of platform engineering and operations at Harvard Business School Online. One of the buildings of Harvard Business School is my background. You can see back there. But prior to this position, I worked as an associate director of academic technology in Harvard University Information Technology, the overall information technology of Harvard University. A large organization of about 700 plus people, not all of them in development, of course. My Agile adventure, or what I like to call my Agile adventure, probably began around 2012 or 2013. So I've been in Agile for close to 10 years at this point. And it was when Harvard University Information Technology wanted to start formalizing some processes. I took, along with my team, several full day Agile Scrum training. And this is part of the good. I was very fortunate that my development team, who I was overseeing at the time, just loved the concept of Agile. They love the iterative aspects of it. They love the sort of the meetings where you got together and had retrospectives. They liked the planning. I have fond memories of, after that training, going down to the local Staples Center and with my team, and we bought 3x5 cards and magnets and markers for the whiteboard so we could create our dashboards and we could create our stories. We had planning poker with actual cards. And from that day on, we were pretty much a Scrum team. And, we made modifications to the process to suit our needs. We were a small team. And we went forward from there. So that's the good. It can be a really awesome change to an organization and to a team, especially if people buy into it and really appreciate it for what it is. As the years passed, our organizations merged, organizations became larger, and the process became a little bit more formalized. And some of the bad that came out of that is that there were folks who just didn't want to be brought into the Agile fold. They just didn't want to be a part of it. And, we moved forward with Agile, and part of the bad, and I would say even this is the ugly, is that we lost some people because we decided to move along with Agile. But nevertheless, the benefits outweighed the cons, and we moved forward with it. And succeeded in it. Now that I'm at Harvard Business School Online, I work with more engineers, and there's more management layers, and we take advantage of the scale methodology. And that is also a good part of Agile, is that it's expandable, it's scalable. You can make it happen no matter where you are or who you are. And one last point, as I mentioned before, we modified the Agile process to our needs. And again, that's part of the good of Agile, is that in itself is a very flexible process that you can manage it and flex it to your own needs. And I think that's about it from this end of the spectrum. So back to you, Pepe.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for that. Kim, thank you for joining. You're up.
Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Robinson, and I'm an Agilist as well. I've been working in Agile for about, I want to say, I really want to say about 15 years, but I don't want to start counting because I'll age myself. But it's been about 15 years. I started my career as a software engineer at Cisco. And I know Pepe, you guys had Assurant on there, but I just recently took a new position at Cisco again. So I'm back at Cisco. I started my career there in 1999, and I'm back as an enterprise agile coach. And of course, I'm loving it. Let's see. As far as the good, there's a lot of good that comes with Agile. Of course, as a lot of you have said, Agile is configurable. I've seen companies go from being hopeless to having much hope just with using the Agile process or the Agile frameworks. Um, uh, you have companies where it's like, oh my goodness, we've always done it this way. And, we're just used to doing it this way. And there's a lot of confusion. There's not a lot of communication. Well, with Agile, of course, it brings about communication. It helps the teams normalize. Of course, they go through the storming phase. They go through all of these things. But in the end, it's beautiful when they can deliver as a team and they can see their products much faster. Right. So they no longer have to wait to the end. They can get their products faster to their customer, and it brings about delight to the team. There's delight to your customer, and then it makes the teams want to keep going. So that is something that I really like about Agile. Um, the other thing is, for me, I love teaching. I am a coach. I am a teacher. That is what I really enjoy. I have an SPC, which is a safe program consultant, and I've trained, I want to say I've trained over 500 people in different at different companies, in different settings, different environments. I've done one-on-one coaching, training, and that is my sweet spot. So, as a coach and as a trainer, um, I don't, once I train, different teams and individuals, I don't just leave them hanging. They can always come back to me for additional information. And, of course, with Agile, once again, it's configurable. So everyone's situation is different. I don't care. You can take Agile and you can have the same book, but you're going to walk out with a different process, a different configuration. So that's what I enjoy about Agile. As far as the bad, I can be completely honest. I think the bad for me is when I've made a mistake and I've said, yes, this team should be Agile. And we get a couple weeks in, maybe a month in, and we look back and we're like, nope, we pushed too hard, and this team isn't ready for Agile, or this isn't an Agile team, right? Um, so that's one of the things where, it happens. But I think what's most important is to realize when this team is not an Agile team and to move on to the teams that are ready for Agile. As far as uh, the ugly is when you have team members who just don't want to give up the old way of doing things. And they're saying, oh, well, this is how we've always done it. This is how we've always done it. And it's like, hey, get on board. We're trying something new. And you just have that one person who just don't want to change their mindset. They're not ready to grow in that space. And that's okay. But, if you don't separate that person from your team, they will eventually contaminate the team. So that's when it's ugly because, we want to change the hearts and minds of the people and of our team members. And when you can't, when it's that one person, you just can't change their heart and mind, it's okay. So that's when I think it's ugly. And that's, that's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Kim. And now it's Stijn's turn. Stijn, thank you for making yourself available. I know you're really busy.
It's all right. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm a VP development for Nuance, and most of my career I've been spending on speech recognition programs. I actually started out 20, 30 years ago in Dragon Systems. And if we talk about process, it was very much like a startup where we were trying to build the greatest and the best possible speech recognition solution, large vocabulary dictation solutions. And I must say, this was very much like you came in and you got a task. At the beginning of the day, your manager basically told you exactly what to do. And that person knew exactly how everything was hanging together. But as a team, you didn't really have the Scrum experience where you were going to meet every day and checking in with everyone, how everyone is doing on their own little task. That was completely different. So in many respects, that world was very exciting. It's also very chaotic. And I think if you start scaling up to a larger organization where you need more predictability, you need more of a process in place to really organize how you work together with many, many people, right? So after the 90s, we moved over to another company and it was very waterfallish. I have to say there was some advantage there because it forced us to drive us in a process where we were defining very clearly what exactly a particular release was about. And so these releases, they were spanning over 9 months to 12 months, year of work. So the negative was that after we had defined the actual plan, which was usually a matter of 4 to 8 weeks, we would come up with this massive project plan. The engineering teams would disappear. So we would start working for 8 months, nonstop, and the product managers, the product owners, as we call it now, they would occasionally check in, but fully trust that we were building exactly what we were told to build. Of course, that's not the case. Software is pretty fluid, and there's all kinds of things happening in the software that were not asked. And there were also things not implemented that was asked, right? So in terms of transparency, that was completely lacking in those days. And I think this is where we started shifting towards the late 2000s to create some more visibility. How do we embrace this new way of working? Like this extreme programming was a buzzword that was being shared around. How do you get to an agile way? And we start building out a method to have iterative processes of a quarter to kind of get used to the fact, well, maybe let's break down the work into smaller pieces. And that definitely took some shift in thinking and accepting that we would be able to have a smaller deliverable that we would share with our stakeholders, and then would go off, make some corrections. And eventually we moved into a more embraced full Scrum approach. And that's actually how I met Pepe 2 or 3 years ago. Our development teams at Nuance really committed to really rethinking how we're going to do software development and start embracing some of the more modern approaches. And we were doing Scrum in a way that was kind of going along, and we've all felt comfortable, but we were all doing it differently. And so kind of resetting the base and the expectations of what is a Scrum Master, what is a product owner, what is a team, what are the ceremonies to kind of really baseline everything across the organization, I think was very useful to kind of get a more homogeneous way of approaching software development. I think for our development organization, that was extremely useful, but it's a process, right? It's never done. And every day we are dealing with people, and people change, people come and go. And so it's not something that is set in stone. You solve the ones and now you're ready to go for as long as you want. So for me, Scrum, as a VP, I'm not really into the coaching. I'm not into the Scrum Mastering. I'm often observing the teams. What I'm looking at is a predictable process that I understand, that the teams understand, and I kind of check in, well, what is the type of velocity I can expect over time from certain teams? And that's what I'm looking at. So I think that is definitely positive. I think the bad, and I'm kind of reflecting on our transformation that we went through the last couple of years or 3 years, is the transformation was very much driven from an engineering perspective. It is also very important that the transformation happens on the product owner side, the product management side, and it's the totality of all the team members that need and the stakeholders that need to be involved, they need to embrace this concept of agile. And if the other side is not really there, then you run the risk that you're not really running agile, you're running iterative processes, and it looks like Scrum, but it's really not really meeting the original intent. How can we build something, release it, learn, get some feedback, and adjust the roadmap? That is in itself a challenge to kind of change the organization, and trying to get that change done in development was challenging. Getting that change done in the product owner side is equally challenging. So I would say is that bad? I think it's human nature. I think we should be very aware of the challenges, and it's not a given that everyone is going to embrace those changes, as some of our panelists already indicated. It can be difficult. I think the ugly, I would have to think about it. I don't think it's something really standing out as ugly. If there's something ugly, it's probably because people are not really cooperating at all and breaking a team because they are having some negative energy or passive aggression that makes the good intents of many people not work. I think that's a possibility. Of course, you can take measures, but I would say the ugly is if you have negative people in your team, it might be very difficult to get success. And I think that's maybe a general statement, but definitely something here to raise as well as part of the conversation. And some of the experiences I don't mind sharing. All right, Pepe, that's my quick intro.
Excellent, excellent. So everybody has been very, very polite, very modest, and I appreciate that. So let's, I want to open the microphone to the floor for any questions and across the panel. I am going to just be introducing some topics that might be thought-provoking, but obviously we all know practitioners, experts, managers all agree that there are our industries, our organizations, our fields have been impacted. You know, the combination of technology, the Agile Manifesto, social unrest, the pandemic, all this has brought about change across industries. So that being said, how do you guys in the panel see, and Gaurang, I will give you the next turn. How do you guys see this impact in your current teams and your current products? So I'll take a volunteer from the panel. Before I start, I open a question from the audience.
I think, I believe that the changes that we've seen in the industry have really led businesses to adopt Agile even more. I think everyone had to pivot over the last year or so in ways in which we did not imagine even the month prior. So learning how to be adaptable, how to be agile and pivot is something that everyone just had to quickly come to terms with. And so it's really becoming a part, I would say, of the way in which we work, and just understanding the importance of iteration, I think, is becoming more and more understood with our businesses and our industries. Understanding that you have to put your people first. I would say one of the things that came out of this pandemic is people started to be more flexible with themselves, and they started to really in on the things that they want to do and in which they want to do it. People working from home more. I mean, I believe even before this panel started, we were talking about going into the office and how that's such like a far-fetched thing now. And so businesses are having to adapt to that. And a lot of that has to do with the way in which they develop software, even in your non-traditional, on your non-traditional team. Well, I'm seeing more and more HR teams become agile. Even the team that I'm working with, I'm working in business intelligence. That's not your traditional software development team, but I'm sending them through an agile transformation now because we have to find ways to to pivot when various business requests come in. We need to learn how to iterate, fail fast, fail early, fail often, and just really learn from those failures, for lack of a better term. So I think, to kind of round it out, I think businesses are going to have to adapt in order to remain successful.
Thank you, Aletha. Gaurang, you're next.
Thank you. Thanks to the panelists. Appreciate your time and your thoughts. Hopefully this is a quick, simple question. I would like, each one, or maybe as many of you as can, to just say, based on where you sit today, what's the state of Agile certification? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it ugly?
Okay, so I can take that one. So as far as the Agile certifications, I can tell you that a lot of people during the pandemic, a lot of people have been getting certified. They've been getting multiple Agile certifications to help ensure that they're not stuck in one area, right? So you have a lot of people who are getting Scrum Master certifications. These are managers, these are directors, and then of course these are team members. People want to have a more diverse skill set in this space. So they're getting the different certifications. I also see a lot of people getting SAFe certifications as well, which is the Scale Agile framework, because there's a lot of companies that are moving towards the Scale Agile framework. So that's the good. As far as the bad, I really don't see any bad with it. I can tell you the certifications are getting cheaper because so many people are getting them. Okay, so the certifications the prices are dropping because people are getting them, and companies. The other reason is because you have a lot of companies who are hiring coaches internally and people who can train internally. Okay, so a lot of companies now, you can find, if you go to the right person, you probably have trainers inside your company where they've worked out a deal with the trainer for you to pretty much get trained for free at your company. And as far as bad and the ugly with it, I really haven't seen any bad or ugly with the trainings.
Kim, I have one question along those lines. Kind of going to the bad and ugly. With the fact that so many people are getting certified, are you concerned about the field being oversaturated, or getting to a place of oversaturation?
Hold the answer, Kim, for a moment. Hold the answer. Stijn, you have a question.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to second Kim's response. Like at Nuance, we actually are promoting people to get certified much more aggressively than we have ever done. Really with the intent to make sure that we have the experts in-house, and that when they are the leaders in their practice, that they really know from some knowledge, and can speak with some authority about the practice. And what we have also tried to do is that, because you mentioned that managers and some other people in other roles are getting the certification, that once you embrace the role of Scrum Master, you are only a Scrum Master. So with the certificate, you're not a manager or a technical manager, you are solely focused on a team or a couple of teams. So yes, I would say the state of certification is that we, at least in the Nuance side, we definitely try to promote that experience and knowledge.
Thank you, Stijn. Go ahead, Aletha. You had an interesting, thank you, Stijn. You had an interesting perspective.
Yes. When I heard the question, the first thing I thought about was oversaturation, given the fact that there are so many people who are training, there are so many people who want to be trained. And so I wanted to throw that to Kim, especially given the fact that she's in that space. Do you have any concerns about the market becoming oversaturated with with people with Scrum Master certifications? And do you feel like that will start to, I don't want to value, but do you have any concerns over there being too many Scrum Masters?
No. And the reason why I say, I mean, yes, it can be a concern, but I don't see it being a concern because a lot of people can say, okay, well, I'm a Scrum Master, but if you do not have that experience, you will not be successful. When you think about the 5 stages of a team, of building a team, right? If you are not if you don't have the experience as a Scrum Master, you will get stuck at that second stage, that storming stage. You will never come out of the storming stage and enter into the norming stage. So with that, yeah, anyone can get the certification, but everyone does not have the experience. So I think that's what sets us apart from the people who are just getting certifications and hoping to land, the job. It's the experiences the experience will keep you there.
I'd say just my experiences at GitLab, or the engineering team or development, engineering team of about 300 people spread across the world, I think working in 20 different time zones. We don't have Scrum Masters. We do Agile all asynchronously, meaning mostly in writing, although we do have virtual stand-ups via Slack channels where people are asking, what did you do today? What are you going to do tomorrow? Are you stuck, etc. Sometimes it works fabulously and sometimes it breaks down. Some people have certifications at GitLab. Like one of my peers really is a big fan of the safe Agile framework. But it's not something just at this company, at least, where we look for that or encourage it, but we definitely don't discourage it either. It's not a negative, but it's not necessarily positive here either. But this is one data point from one company.
Yeah, I want to add something to that, Wayne. So there's another thing that's happening right now in the market. So of course, we've been talking about Scrum. A lot of people are very familiar with Scrum, but a lot of, and people have heard about Kanban, right? And they've kind of sort of practiced Kanban, but Kanban is on the horizon as well. A lot of teams are adopting Kanban where it's not as prescriptive, right? And it doesn't require all the roles and the ceremonies, right? So it's more configurable than Scrum. And within Kanban, they have something now called Flow Manager. So it's not a Scrum Master, it's a Flow Manager. Pretty much it's, the sister or the brother to the Scrum Master, but it's pretty much your facilitator and the person, of course, who removes the impediments for the team. And keeps the team on the track. So the Flow Manager will be on the horizon as well from a Kanban perspective because a lot of teams are adopting Kanban. And that's software development team, business teams as well. I'm sorry, what was that, Pepe?
No, I thought you were done. Apologies. I wanted to say that Missy Thomas wrote a question to the group. Can you speak to team characteristics or types of projects where Agile is not conducive?
I'll try to field that one, even though I'm very pro-Agile and I think Agile can be used for most things. Sort of the work that I don't think is conducive to Agile, at least in my experience and what I've seen over the years, is sort of the day-to-day ad hoc maintenance that sort of occurs. So for example, if you're a system administrator and something crops up, systems start going down or, alerts start going off, you just sort of have to deal with it at that moment. And it's difficult to, I would say, Agilize that in the sense of, planning ahead 2 weeks, planning a sprint around it, things of that nature. Now, having said that, we have tried to incorporate those kinds of incidents into our Agile process by creating what my one team used to call the magical fun buffer story, which was a story that just encompassed things that would just crop up, unexpectedly. We'd assign, a certain number of story points to this story that we had no idea what was going to happen in it, or if anything was going to happen in it. And we incorporated that into our sprint process and use that to calculate or predict how much work might be needed for it.
Thank you, Michael. Peter, I think you have some words about either certifications or teams not, or projects not conducive to Agile.
Sure.
Go for it.
The projects not conducive to Agile makes me think of, I guess, the practical situations where it's one thing to have a team that's Agile and working towards a single release in an Agile form. It's another to have, Agile releases like many websites or apps do, where they have incremental releases flying out all the time. Some projects, especially, I guess I have some knowledge of this because I worked a lot with airlines, and airlines, like other industries, of course, have very mission critical things. And it's a very sensitive process and a very tricky process sometimes to update software in all the places that need to be updated. And so I would say the ability to run an Agile shop, especially as far as releases are concerned, I think is directly in line with how much you have like really good testing infrastructure and really good QA and really good, just like, are you getting the nuts and bolts right so that as you're making changes and iterating through things, you're not blowing up other stuff, or you're not creating an issue with some other system that is 40 years old and still in production. I think that there's a lot of benefits to that iterative approach and the continual communication. But again, the process really matters. And so, and again, there are just still some systems out there in the world, or software that's attached to hardware devices, et cetera, that need these chunked out releases and need process around that. So even if within each release you're doing things iteratively, you're always sort of targeting these specific systems. And again, testing, unit tests, integration tests, user flow, end-to-end tests, like that makes a big difference if you can have all of that infrastructure behind Agile teams, because that can make the difference. And making all these other parties that need to connect to your stuff feel more comfortable with themselves moving to Agile.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. So there is a couple of questions. One coming from Tom Conti. Wayne, because you work on cybersecurity, and I feel that is one of the industries that moves faster than most, I would say. I would argue, rather. So what the question is, are frameworks like Nexus getting any traction for scaling Scrum? And then I've seen Scrum as a term in some teams, especially in those close to operations, whether it is IT or customer facing. Any reaction to that?
Yeah, I'd say is building security into the process rather than it being something separate is really important. The teams don't like someone coming from the outside saying, oh, well, you're working on these things, these features, that's great, but what about all these security issues? The security prioritization should be part of the overall prioritization process and really enable the teams with both tools and processes that are integrated in what they do, not something separate from what they do. So for example, automated secure code scanning. Automate that the developers can see the results, and with each build perhaps, or if not with each release that goes to a staging area, is see the results of those scans, both scanning the code, scanning the dependencies, which are really important. So they can see it right there and then and work it into the process. Well, you still do things like bug bounty programs and penetration testing to find security issues and having escalation procedures when things do fall through the cracks and you do have an issue. But working it into the overall process rather than being something separate is really, really key in my opinion. Knowing that sometimes, just like, you can have security escalations can be similar to outages. You can have a complete outage of the components that a team is responsible for. That if it's a high priority outage, it trumps other priorities sometimes to respond to it, and having instant procedures. Similar with security. And you don't want to over prioritize those things, but you also don't want to under prioritize them. So those are some of the key aspects, to not be the next organization that has a major security breach that is publicized. As Webber says, you don't want to be on the front page of the Register or the New York Times, in a bad way in terms of those.
So when is building security into a product? This is coming from David Hyman. Is building security in a product something similar to building quality into a product?
I would say so. It's very similar, but I think that was for David.
Okay. Let me see. Anybody from the audience? Okay. Folks are shy today. Let's help them. Let's do like a rapid dissection. Hold on. I'll be remiss. Doug Etkin, for some, Kanban is a benefit because it removes the artificial constraint for the time box of the sprint length. But for others, the time box of the sprints helps. Okay, just an observation. Thank you, Doug. So I would like to ask the panel, in the last 12 months, have you guys seen a particular trend impacting our industries? Experts, practitioners, we know that if anything can be measured, it can be improved. So one of the topics that are of interest to me is metrics. What are some good metrics to pay attention to when we talk about agility, Scrum, Kanban, and so forth? What are some of the good metrics and what are some of the bad metrics out there? I turn it to the panel. Stijn?
Yeah, I like the velocity metric. I just want to know what the team can do at any given time once they have reached a certain plateau or they've gotten into their groove. There's a lot of discussions where people say we always have to find additional efficiencies and squeeze out more. And if you do it really well, Scrum, you're going to get even more efficiencies. And I don't really buy into that. I think once you have established a certain modus operandi, that the team will have a certain constant level of output. So that's why I kind of attach myself to velocity, and a lot of other metrics are ways of looking at the same data in a different perspective, but I don't really give you a lot of additional information. There's a metric where they look at, given a certain story, how many days do you spend before that story is completed? And a small story should therefore not take a lot of time. But there could be all kinds of external factors impeding the completion of a story that get lost in the metric. And so that's why it's interesting to look at, but I wouldn't really give too much value or weight to that type of metric. That's just my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I'll chime in next. So I would say over the last 2 or 3 years or so, I've become a huge fan of leveraging throughput and cycle time, even with my Scrum teams, over velocity. And here's my gripe with velocity. It has less to do with the team and more so to do with how leadership may use velocity. One of my peeves is when I hear a manager, a director, or whomever say, Team A has a velocity of 35 points, while Team B only has 12. What's wrong with Team B? It's not apples to apples. and as I've had outright fights with leadership over comparing teams based on velocity. And so that's my gripe with it. I would say the other side of that, now the good part of velocity is that it is taking into account your level of effort. And I don't like to equate the time. That's another thing that gets under my skin when people equate points to time. It's not the same thing. But when you're looking at an effort of a team and what it actually takes from effort and complexity for a team to accomplish something, I think it is great from that standpoint. The problem that I've seen with it is that, and this is really more so a training issue, is helping teams to understand how they should be estimating these things. And so sometimes I feel like velocity is almost like a junk number, depending on how your team is formulating their estimates and things like that. It gets tossed around and misused a lot, and so that is I think I'm a little scarred and scorned by velocity for that reason. Whereas cycle time and throughput, it's something that I feel the teams as well as leadership have a better grasp of, and it really shows like what it is that, like, how they're working, and it helps to uncover areas where we have waste points and impediments and roadblocks. I feel like you can see it a little more clearly when you're looking at a combination of cycle time and throughput. But that's my personal preference, just based on experiences. Like I said, leadership has I've had some fights over velocity.
And it's great context, Aletha. I the real emotional response to what you said as well. I've gotten to those same discussions. What we do, we do track points, and we don't compare team to team, although some want to do that. We look at say-do ratios. So how much did the team say they could do, and how much did they do, to try to make that predictable. And if they're getting to 100%, that's not a good thing. If they're at 10%, that's not a good thing. We actually target a 70 to 80% say-do ratio to make things predictable. And then we also look at pull request rates or merge request rates in the system at a team level, not at a per person level. That's really key. Even though it might be a signal if it's really high or really low on a per person basis, that something should be investigated. It doesn't mean it's either something to celebrate or something that's a problem. But it might be, but it is often not. So, and sometimes managers get their head wrapped around that, or people start comparing people or comparing teams. We do actually compare across teams on a team merge request rate. The number of merge requests done per person per month or per release. We do major releases monthly. And it makes people break things up into smaller chunks of work, which is one of the things, one of our goals is to be more iterative, which is great. And overall it works well, but it also can be very, very controversial. There's no good way to do these things, in my opinion. There's only some bad ways, and then some ways that are okay, but never great. But that's just my opinion.
Yep. And Michael, Peter would like to add anything?
Oh, sure. I definitely agree that I think velocity can be a very useful metric, but it can also be abused as well. My team, back when I was in academic technology, we used velocity all the time, but we used it within the scope of our own team. One thing to mention about velocity is that velocity is kind of useless unless you go through many sprints to sort of get a good judgment of what your velocity is and how many story points your team can handle throughout a sprint. Having said that, we found velocity very useful when we were doing our sprint planning, in the sense that we could predict, oh, we've really overdone it this time. There's way too much work on the board. We're not going to get all this done in 2 weeks. Let's lower our expectations down a little bit. Or the opposite, which is, oh, we don't have enough work. We're going to get through all this really quickly. Let's add a couple more stories into the mix. So we took advantage of velocity in that sense.
Peter, I would like to sort of like switch it around. Any trend you notice, or any comment, any reaction, negative or positive, to metrics that are not useful? Let's start with you.
Metrics that are not useful. I would agree with the like individual merge requests or like individual check-ins, that sort of thing, because every project's different and some stuff just takes a while. It's not necessarily a measure of productivity, like how often you merge code. Lines added or removed on an individual basis, it's odd how that one comes up. The kind of turnaround time on like bugs or feature requests or that sort of thing, because I feel like you can, I don't know, certain managers can kind of game those things. I feel like just regular measurable accountability. I think the best experience I've had is similar to the kind of say do aspect, where you create something measurable. We will merge a certain feature or get a certain chunk of the code done or story points finished, and then score yourselves. Yeah, usually around 70 or 80% is what you kind of go for. Doing that, it's hard to do because making things measurable, especially in smaller sprints, can be tough. But that exercise is a good one for discipline. And again, sticking to requirements. I see lots of discussion about how agility is best at sticking to and adapting requirements. Like if you can keep measurable and accountable through those different expressed says, to use the terminology, I think that's best. All these individual productivity things, I think they can be real morale killers too, if you know that you're in a project where you're just going to have fewer check-ins.
All right. So in 2021, this is for the panel. In 2021, is the happiness metric still a thing?
Yes.
Is it?
I mean, shouldn't it be?
It is, yeah, it is used, Pepe. But I have to say, within my group, there's often pushback, as you probably know.
Mm-hmm.
So we very much use it as a way to get a conversation going, and then let the topics and the issues and the gripes that live with people, let it come out. So in that sense, I think it's useful to have a happiness metric, but I wouldn't overreact to a particular measure. We also not doing it every sprint, so we kind of do it every 3 or 4 sprints max, just to make sure people don't really get fed up with the metrics and where they have to say, well, you ask me again to express how happy I am with the team, with the organization, with the company. You have to make sure that that's not over asked, because at the end of the day, they're not really children. They have some real opinions, and they don't necessarily want to express everything every couple of weeks. Right?
Anybody else from the panel?
I would definitely say that the happiness metrics, for me, is still very important. It's something that I tap into with the team. I try to do it at every retro, but then I also leverage, the term is escaping me right now, but it's essentially a survey. It's a Spotify technique, and I don't know why I can't call the name of it. I'm gonna blame it on it being Thursday. But I essentially survey the team and do check-ins with them and get an understanding. It's a scorecard. If there's anyone in the audience who can help me out right now, because it's bothering me that I can't think of the term, but just leveraging scorecards and things like that with the team to get a sense from them of how they feel they're doing as a team, and are they enjoying their work? Are they learning anything? Do they feel that their impediments and their issues are being properly addressed? How do they feel like they're communicating as a team? So making sure that those metrics, like our velocity, throughput, cycle time, that we're hitting the marks for those, for me, is equally, if not more important. Because if your team isn't happy, if your team isn't working well, then you're never going to see the velocity and cycle time and throughput metrics that you want to see anyway, because they're not going to be effective.
Mm-hmm. Kim?
Was that for me?
Yep. Any reaction? So the question came from the audience, right? So can someone provide documentation on the happiness metric? And I just want to get the conversation going. So anything along those lines?
We do
Any reaction? Any reaction?
It's hard. And one way that I've seen work that we do is we do a net promoter score type survey internally at the company that's anonymous. And it asks questions like, you know, on a rating of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend a friend or colleague to work at this company? And you do the standard net promoter score thing of 9s and 10s are promoters. I think it's 6, 7, and 8 are neutrals, and you don't count them. And anything below 6 is a detractor, and you subtract the promoters from the detractors to get that. Because if somebody doesn't give you a 9 or 10, they're really not going to recommend, and you don't. That's something that we do. It's not perfect, but it works okay. I'm really interested to hear what everybody else does too.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
And I just, it's the squad health check model, guys.
What is it? What is it, Aletha?
The squad health check model. It was bothering me that I couldn't think of it. It is one of the most important tools that I can use with my teams in terms of helping to really tap into things aren't necessarily uncovered during a retrospective. Because I'm sure, you know, especially those who are Scrum Masters have found that retros, you sometimes have to like really pull information from your teams, whereas with the health check, you're kind of giving them an anonymous space in many cases and you're asking more specific questions that really help them to think and probe in a different way in which you would during the retro. So I really love the health check.
Yeah. And then for some of my teams, we've just used the Agile maturity model. We've taken pieces of the Agile maturity model. We've used the pieces that are applicable, and we just configure it to the team or to the organization within the enterprise. So, and that is standard. That's something that you can probably find online. And you can configure it to your enterprise or your company's needs as well.
Well, thank you, Kim. A quick time check is 8:12. We'll probably have 1 or 2 more questions from the audience. Okay, Stephen, how useful are retrospectives, and can the retrospective process become stale over time? And if so, how do you improve it? Kim, we'll start with you.
Oh, yes. Retrospectives most definitely can become stale over time. As Aletha said, the retrospectives, you know, sometimes it's hard to extract information from your team members. So it is really important for you to switch your retrospectives up. There's different methods you can use. There's different tools that you can use for your retrospectives as well. Instead of asking, hey, what did what went well, what didn't go well, and what can be done better next time, you can switch the verbiage. You know, what makes you happy, what didn't make you happy, what would you like, what would you like to see in the next sprint or iteration. A couple other things that I've done, I've chosen topics, things that I've topics, and we retrospect.
Audio dropped out. No.
Can you guys hear me?
I think it was Kim.
We lost her.
Yep. Yeah.
Now you're back.
Yeah.
Now you're back.
Okay. So, okay, I apologize. So we've also used tools such as Retrium. That's one that I like. So the tools sometimes get the teams engaged, as well as, like I said, you can choose a question, a couple of questions, or a couple of topics. Those are some things to get them engaged as well.
Thank you, Kim.
But you should always switch up your retrospective. It should never just be, what did what went well, what didn't go well, what can we do? That will become a system, and you will get bad information, or you won't get any information at all. So.
Thank you. All right, the well is drying. one last chance, folks. It's 8:15, and I promise our panelists that I will not shackle them to the keyboard. We all been probably stuck in front of a computer for a long time. So if there isn't any other question, I want to thank you all for joining tonight, especially you panelists. I know that you guys have busy schedules, and thank you for coming to Agile New England and share your experiences, your expertise. Now is the turn for the panel if they like to ask a question to the rest of the panel of the audience before we continue to our program.
Yeah, I have a question. It's about Scrum at scale. I think that is there's not a lot of rules around Scrum at scale, and it's very difficult to implement in a predictable way. And I think it often runs against one of the goals of Scrum to minimize the number of meetings you have per week or every 2 weeks to kind of make it all more organized. When you get to scaled Scrum and you deal with 5 to 10 different teams that need to coordinate, suddenly you have this explosion of little meetings that need to be driven forward to make sure everyone is talking and resolving issues. I found that a very hard part of the process to kind of see how you do that well. So that's my observation I'm throwing out here.
Kim, Aletha, Peter?
I agree. Scrum at scale, once again, I think it's best to configure it as much as possible, right? So of course, there are additional meetings because when you're Scrum at scale, you have to add on the Scrum of Scrum. You may attend, so you're attending more meetings. Of course, you have your PI planning, but in addition to that, you have your inspect and adapt. So you're attending more meetings. My recommendation would always be to divide and conquer. I like to divide and conquer. I like to I like to have a proxy. When I'm working at scale, I always recommend having a proxy. Someone else, it can be someone else outside your team, it can be someone in your team who their workload may not be as heavy as everyone else. Use them as your proxy. Let them go to the Scrum of Scrum. That gives them experience as well. You're growing their skill set as well. And you're giving them visibility across the organization. So always use a proxy.
In addition to that, I think the other important piece that we tend to overlook is the lean concepts that are also talking about scaled agile. Sometimes that kind of gets lost in the mix. And so if you are practicing lean meeting management, even with those additional meetings, it shouldn't be death by meeting. I am very big on coming into meetings with an agenda. Everyone has an understanding of what it is that we're looking to accomplish in that meeting, what the outcomes are, objectives, things of that nature. And so if you have that and you're in a meeting where it's being properly facilitated and you're sticking to the topics, it doesn't make it as painful, or I would say it shouldn't feel as process heavy. And I also feel, especially now that I'm at an organization that really practicing Agile, scaled Agile in the traditional sense, and they're trying to remain as true to it as possible. I definitely see a lot of the benefits of it in terms of the PI planning and making sure that you're getting the proper buy-in and sign-offs and things like that on your initiatives versus with traditional Agile or traditional Scrum teams. In many cases are working in silos and people aren't aware of what others are doing. I definitely see the benefits, but again, just to reiterate, I feel like leveraging the lean portion of this really helps it to really brings it home and it really makes it most effective.
Thank you for that. So quick time check is 8:19, almost 8:20. and we'll continue since the portion of the questions has come to an end. I just want to again say again to the panelists, thank you for joining us.